Hello and welcome to this evening's live broadcast. It did occur to me that I could do this by doing a video on it, but the thing about doing a difference between doing a video is and a live broadcast. On a live broadcast, I feel like if I make a mistake, then I can be forgiven because I'm speaking off the top of my head. Whereas if I do the video, I've got to check all my facts. And so doing a live broadcast is considerably easier than doing an actual video. Now, what I'm going to try and do as much as possible is to try and do them at 2000 hours Central European time, although sometimes it's easier for me to do them beforehand. An advantage about doing it beforehand is this: we've got the light, because now it's 100 hours and the light is going to get less, so it's better to be as early as possible. Also, I've got to finish at 21:15 because on the other channel I also have a premiere that time every single day. Now, yesterday, that's to say the 9th of May, as always, Putin made a speech, and I thought I'd do a little bit of analysis on this one. If you've got any questions, just do put them up on the live. If you're seeing this after live is gone, then put them below, and I or somebody else, or maybe somebody else, will come back to you. Now, the May Day, or Victory Day, I should say, Victory Day. Victory Day is something which doesn't date the Second World War. This actually started off as being a holiday in Brezhnev's period. And I think now I'm utterly convinced the reason why it's no longer it is now the main holiday is because they certainly the workers' holiday, 1st of May. Well, there's not much point in me doing that because it's no longer a workers' state, so to speak. And doing the revolution. The current regime in Moscow doesn't want to encourage people to revolt. Now, you may say, well, the communist system wasn't a worker system either. It was a corrupt system, very similar to that we have today. And I would say, yes, that is correct. But it did actually pretend to be a sort of a workers' system where it was the rule of the workers of the world unite, the same way as the current regime in Moscow pretends that it is a pro-Russian regime, where of course that it's a pro-Russian regime, but they steal from the Russian people and send them money to Switzerland, the United Kingdom, United States, British offshore islands, and places like this. If this were a pro-Russia thing, then they wouldn't be stealing from the Russian people in the first place. At least that's the way I see it, and maybe I'm just being a bit too cynical. Hello, hello, Colin. So yes, we have nothing to lose but our chains. Indeed, in I was at the Gdansk shipyard in the Solidarity period, and there was a strike, and it was said there, workers of the world unite, you've nothing to lose but your chains. There was somebody actually put it up there. Unfortunately, I no longer have the photograph I took at the time, but I bet someone else did take one at the time. Hello, Corey in Phoenix, Arizona. So right. So anyway, so I've got the speech here. Now, this speech itself is basically, first of all, he didn't say anything which could have been he didn't say anything really out of the ordinary to start off with. Anyway, I'll tell you what we'll do. I'll do a little bit of a talk about this speech. The first thing he said, he welcomed people who arrived there, but he said the following. So he said, the defense of the motherland when its destiny was at stake has always been sacred. It was the feeling of true patriotism that the militia stood up for the fatherland. Soldiers went on the offensive at the Borodino field. At the Borodino field. That was his words. He said it, not me. When was the Battle of Borodino? It was 1812, and I'm not talking about 12 minutes past 6. He clearly got his wars mixed up. Now, if you saw the video I did on his grandfather, I mentioned the fact there was a place called Borodino near where his grandfather lived, and there were battles there. It was occupied, I can't remember the exact date now, it was the beginning of November 1941, stayed till about 15th of December, thereabouts, in Nazi hands. So it was sort of close to where, but I don't think he's thinking of this hamlet where there's a couple of houses, two cows and a dog living. I think what he is thinking about, he's just getting his wars mixed up. And the reason he's getting his wars mixed up is because he doesn't know anything about history. And so, right, so that would be the first point. We did mention the battles, the big battles there: Moscow, Leningrad, Kiev, Minsk, Stalingrad, Kursk, Sevastopol, and Kharkov, which is fair enough because, for example, at Kharkov, there were 3 battles there, and the other places, I suppose we could say it was 2 battles at Kiev, really, and there was a really long battle at Leningrad. Sevastopol, there was 2 battles as well. So yeah, that's a good choice of places. But seeing as we're on the choice of places, and one thing now. He is talking of the Soviet Union, and he's claiming that Russia is the successor state to the Soviet Union, which I think is fair enough. But which countries were the ones which were occupied? Well, there were 5 countries that were occupied, well, 5 in the current geographical borders, which were occupied in the war against the Soviet Union. That's the 3 Baltic states: Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia. Belarus wasn't completely occupied, and Ukraine was completely occupied as well under its current borders. And not only that, its current borders, all the borders it's had in the past, which I will talk about in a separate video. So but Russia, have a look at it on the map. Only a tiny bit of Russia compared to the whole thing. Russia was occupied by about 5-6%. I may be able to do it properly. But if you look at the maximum advances, that's to say, if you look at the places where they advanced to, Nazis advanced to up to the 6th of December 1941, then look at the position in the front on the 19th of November 1942, and you sort of took the maximum advances at these points, you will notice that Russia, there's a huge amount of Russia that the Nazis never came anywhere near it. Hello, Rowan in Tampa, Florida, and Isa as well in Japan. And so it is really unfair for sort of Russia to sort of claim because the people who were killed were largely not Russians. They were Belarusians, they were Ukrainians. These were the main people who were killed. Hello, Christopher. I might have said that earlier. In Romania, and so this is part of the twisting of history. Now, I do accept that some of these really big battles did take place in Russia. So that's Stalingrad. We've got Kursk. We've got Leningrad, the longest siege in history, probably. And the battles in front of Moscow. This all happened in Russia. I accept that, but most of the battles didn't take place in Russia. And as from what I'm going to have to get the date right here, by the summer of 1944, there was still some Russian territory occupied, but on the whole, in the south, there was no by the summer or late summer of 1943, there was no German troops, Nazi troops in southern Russia. So anyway, so I can't accept the fact this. Anyway, so Putin does point out there's no family in Russia that was not burnt by the Great Patriotic War, and that is absolutely true. There wasn't. Probably not true. Anyway, the scale of deaths is horrendous. But one thing about the scale of deaths is that at the time, after the Second World War, if you have a look at newspapers, what Stalin said, they were talking 4 or 5 million. 4 or 5 million is horrendous as well, but they weren't talking 22 or now 27 million dead. And so this in itself is some also new, but the thing again, which like Putin does not talk about, is who was responsible for these deaths, and it is Stalin to a large extent. I do appreciate that by after 1941, there was a it was the Nazis killing people. But if Stalin hadn't have allowed this Nazi invasion to take place, then this wouldn't have got this way. Not only that, you've got the fact that Stalin was murdering the Soviet officers en masse in 1937, and you have the other things which led up the purges, where you've got about 800,000 plus people just murdered by the Stalinist regime for no reason at all. You've got the Holodomor in southern Soviet Union, mainly Ukraine, which got between 3.9 to 4.5 million people died because of that. So so Colin points out it was the fresh troops from Siberia which relieved Stalingrad. Russia's so vast it took them 3 weeks to get there. Yeah. And not only that, was probably not only did it take them that long to get there, but it was probably the infrastructure wasn't very good either. But certainly, I mean, it is. I mean, we talk the Siberian troops, like Siberian troops, for example, who were brought in May. I think it's anniversary today. Was it tomorrow? 10th of May, 11th of May, 1939. I can't remember when the war between Soviet Union and Japan started, and once they had found peace from this, then they kept troops in the east, and when they realized that the Japanese were not going to attack, then they pulled these troops over to Moscow, and they saved the day. I bet that's somewhere not true. I don't have evidence. It just occurs to me. It's one of these. Sounds like one of these myths that there's probably not correct. But anyway, I've got no evidence. I'll just say it just sounds like one of these myths that may not be true. Anyway. So Putin says that despite all controversies in international relations, Russia has always advocated the establishment of an equal and indivisible security system. And, as we all know, is utter nonsense. Certainly Soviet Union certainly did not. Soviet Union was an imperialist power. It was not... it didn't want... It wanted to put its whole objective was to force its way, and certainly it did do that in the 60s and 70s. And attempted in the 80s. Putin claimed that last December that he proposed signing a treaty on security guarantees. Russia wanted the West to hold an honest dialogue. That's his words, not mine. If you look at what they were demanding in December, what is the following: is they want NATO to go back to its pre-1997 borders. So as to say, for example, now Poland, where I am, or Romania, where Christopher is, has to leave NATO. Well, that is not the way NATO works. It's not the NATO Charter. And if Putin wanted to, of course, Russia could join NATO. There's nothing stopping Russia joining NATO except its dictatorial regime, the fact it's an imperialist power occupying other countries and has territorial disputes with them. So if you resolve those, then Russia could join NATO, and that would be the end of it. And hello, Dennis. Yes, hello. And so that would. So that's another piece of nonsense that he said. And anyway, but he went on that NATO was having a military build-up on the territories adjacent to us. Again, that's utter nonsense. And he also said that there was threat of an invasion of Russian historical lands, including Crimea. Well, Crimea is not historic Russian. It is internationally recognized being part of Ukraine, and Kiev declared that it could attain nuclear weapons. Now, this happens. This is totally absurd in the circumstances. Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons. There's the Budapest Memorandum. Russia, Sergei Lavrov, okay, Putin was at that time, he was just a corrupt official in, well, maybe he wasn't all that corrupt, no, maybe a bit fair enough, but he was just an official in St. Petersburg. Oh, no, sorry, he lost it by then. He was no longer the mayor's assistant. Well, anyway, he wasn't very important at the time. But Sergei Lavrov was. He signed the Budapest Memorandum. He's now, I'd say, Putin's number two, maybe not the foreign minister, and so he. It is Russia which has broken, Putin, the Putin regime, the fascist regime, the Nazis, who have, or neo-Nazis, who have gone against the Budapest Memorandum. Hello, Tuna and Apki. And so Apki writes a very good thing. I think that Putler would prefer it if NATO joined Russia. Yes, or rather, yes, Russia acquired NATO is probably what he's more interesting and interested in. Anyway, so he said that the United States was trying to advance into the Soviet Union, and that the Russians will never give their love, the motherland, their faith, their traditional values, ancestors, customs, and respect for all peoples and cultures. Well, we know how much respect the Putin regime has for other people's cultures. But what is the thing about going on about traditional values? This is the sort of thing that's actually meant to be rather conservative elements in the West. So I don't want people having, I don't know, transgender people in the army, or people changing sex, or people not going to church, and this type of thing. That's what they mean by their idea of traditional values. I think so. It's, so Putin, he can murder people quite well, but he's happy to go off there to church and light a candle. And he apparently wears his crucifix all the time, or at least that's what from George Bush. Anyway, Colin asks, so I'll come on to Colin's question, because otherwise it'd be rude of me. What do I think? How will Putin react when Sweden and Finland join NATO? There's absolutely nothing he can do about it. He's not going to invade them, because if he did, then that would be about a NATO response. And quite honest, I don't want to see there's nothing he can do about it. Zero. He might try to do things like stopping Georgia joining, and to quite honest, the case of Georgia is that Georgia can't join NATO, and neither can Ukraine as things stand. But there's nothing to do about it. I mean, there's other countries that might, Kazakhstan might want to join it, but then again, it can't because of the regime it's got there. But if they were if Kazakhstan became democratic, yes, it could potentially. Now, one of the things which is curious is by that when the NATO, Finland, Russian border is about 1,350 kilometers or thereabouts, as far as I remember. So this will make the border between NATO and Russia about 4 to 5 times longer, because at the moment it's just a little tiny bit within Norway, opposite Petsamo. There's the bit of the Kaliningrad oblast with Poland, and I suppose you could count the territorial waters of the United States, but there's an island, Diadem. I can't remember now. There's a tiny island where the United States and Alaska, United States and Russia is about 2 kilometers from, or 2.5 kilometers from each other, and normally, in winter it's all frozen over anyway, so you sort of walk across if you want. Tuna writes, when one considers that a good deal of this butchery took place in Ukraine itself, Putin's analogy of the Great Patriotic War with the situation of today is simply insulting. Indeed, it is, Tuna. It's like calling the victims of Nazism Nazis whilst being a Nazi oneself. It is utterly, it is horrendous, really, to actually think about it. At least that's my opinion, anyway. You're right. So I'll continue. Now, one thing that he mentioned was that there were veterans from other countries that wanted to go there, but they were actually stopped from doing so by their governments. I don't know if that's true or not true, to be quite honest. But I've just assumed that so much of it was a lie. I'm assuming that may well be a lie. But if anybody's got evidence to the opposite, now, if you want, I got invited to Russia last week, and I was going to be taken to the Donetsk Oblast and the occupied areas. And anyway, so I got invited anyway. And I was told, well, you can just fly to Moscow. Well, you can't just fly to Moscow, but you can actually go, I believe, still by train. That's open. I could go by Georgian and use the Georgian border, or you can go to Kazakhstan or something, and then cross normally using. But yeah, I don't think you can go there by plane any longer, as far as I'm aware. Oh, sorry. I mean, in my case, I suppose I could just go to the Kaliningrad and then we then use a local plane because the Russian cheap airline. So I think it's called the Kaliningrad Air. It's the Russian version of Ryanair. Anyway, so right now, Donbass militia alongside the Russian army is fighting on its land today, and then he starts talking about people from the past, including Rumyantsev, Potemkin, Suvorov, Voroshilov, crushed their enemies. Don't really think that's entirely true either, because just to kick Voroshilov, his offensive was at the other side of the Ukraine. And but he is admitting that in the Donbass, and this is important, he's admitting that there are Russian troops. Hello, Emir. He's admitting that there are Russian troops in the Donbass. So I mean, obviously, it was this Russian intervention or this invasion went back to 1914. Now, he does also mention the Odessa, what he calls the Odessa martyrs, who were burned alive in House of Trade Unions in May 2014, and to the memory of the old people, women, and children of Donbass who were killed in atrocious barbaric shelling by neo-Nazis. And okay, right now, as far as the Donbass is concerned and the shelling, that was without the neo-Nazi invasion coming from Russia. That wouldn't have happened in the first place. On the other hand, it needs to be pointed out that in the trade union house in Odessa, people were burnt alive, and they were Russian language people, and that may well have been done by neo-Nazis who actually did it. I don't actually know where the investigation on that crime, how it progressed, but I would actually say it. Anyway, so then he asked for a minute of silence, and then he pointed out that the loss of everybody is a loss, and he's promising special support to the children of the killed and wounded comrades in arms. So he's admitting people to die, and he's wishing a speedy recovery to the wounded soldier. And the deepest gratitude goes out for them, to the nurses and medical staff for saving lives. Now, he's therefore admitting then his war people are dying, not him, of course, but other people are actually dying. Now, he says that you've got people, their warriors of different ethnicities are fighting together. And so it is actually, therefore, also admitting that Russia is, so he's saying our people, but then again, by admitting that there are various ethnicities in Russia, many of whom have been treated as second-class citizens. They can't even use their own languages in many cases. Well, having said that, that's not just Putin. That's something that's gone back to the communists before them and the Tsarist times before that. Anyway, so he says, you have defended today what your fathers, grandfathers, and great-grandfathers fought for. The well-being, security of their motherland was their top priority. And loyalty to our fatherland is the main value and the reliable foundation for Russian independence to us. So if loyalty to his fatherland is his main value, why does he send the money that he steals from the Russian people abroad? That's what would be my question for him. Those who crushed Nazism during the Great Patriotic War showed us an example of heroism for all ages, and this is the generation of victors, and we shall always look up to them. So he's looking up to the people who won the Second World War, a war which was, of course, started by Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, something, of course, which is conveniently forgotten. Anyway, so Colin writes that Russian army's been in the Donbass from the start. They didn't wear any insignia, and their vehicles have no identifying marks. Now, on Vice News did an investigation. Simon Ostrovsky from Vice News in 2015. It's called Selfie Soldiers. I even saw it on Russian television. So it was, what they did was this: is that some of these soldiers they had their geolocations on their VKontakte site. That's like a Russian Facebook. I mean, I haven't got an account of VKontakte. I haven't got any pictures or anything there, but I've got. And so they what they did was they followed. They found out where these pictures were taken. So they had people who were in the army. They traced them, and thus proving without any shadow of a doubt that it was the Russian army which did it. And anyway, so Apki writes, my mother met Zelensky once when she was directing plays in Ukrainian theaters. She was the director of the attention theater in Swupsk for a few decades. Well done for meeting Mr. Zelensky in 2000. Must be lots of people say that. I knew him once. And Tuna points out that the Soviet Union did fight a monumental war. Yes, indeed it did. Indeed it did. And certainly it would have been far more difficult for the Western allies, Britain, United States, France, Poland, Czechoslovakia, and everybody else, to Norway, and to have beaten Greece. I'm sorry if I've missed any countries out. To have beaten Nazi Germany without the Eastern Front. But let's remember, I keep insisting the same thing. Without the Soviet Union, the Nazi Germany would never even have attacked Poland, never mind anything else. So anyway, so Akpi writes, she says that's because Putler hit Mariupol so hard. The theatre is in some way special to Zelensky, says as much of Putler's war as it can be. Okay, well, yeah. So if I didn't know this, but if this theatre, presumably that's a theatre that was destroyed in Mariupol. This was to President Zelensky was important, and yeah, she was a vengeful attack. And Apki's dad's a former Navy officer. He said that American sailors went down by the hundreds to get weapons to Russia, but they don't have a single monument anywhere in Russia. And actually, most of them, if anything, are probably British more than Americans. But you've got the PQ convoys, and there's what PQ was going there and coming back. I've forgotten what it was called now. But PQ 17 in huge losses. The United Kingdom was sending huge amounts of material. Now, it needs to be pointed out, in the First World War, the assistance given to Russia was rather weak from the West. There was even some kind of a deal where some ammunition, I think it was sent, and some Russian troops ended up on the Western Front. I mean, it was a very small contingent, but of course, it's blown out of all proportions by the current Russian media. And so I think that support for the Soviet Union was seen in this way. Today, I was looking at some of the documents about from Katyn, the mass murders of Polish officers, around 22,000 Polish, and not just officers, but there were civilians and all sorts of other people in there as well. But Polish people murdered in this Katyn massacres, and the documentation for that, where this was a major problem for the Western Allies. How do they present it, or do they just look the other way? What do they do in these circumstances? I mean, what does one do when one country it was on the Nazi side, then suddenly Nazis attack it? Now it becomes by default one's own ally, and does its former crimes be overlooked? Well, that's exactly what happened, as it turned out. I mean, maybe during the war I can understand for pragmatic reasons, but after the war, I think something should have been done. Anyway, so Emir, a moment. Emir is claiming that Zelensky's a cocaine addict. Don't know where he got that information from. Probably it was on Russia Zim or something like that. Russia 24. Russia. Anyway, so now Emir claims that it was impossible for the Western Allies to win against Germany if the Soviet Union followed. I think that is utterly untrue. On the other, I accept it being much more difficult because the most of the Wehrmacht, something like 3/4 of the Wehrmacht, was actually tied down by the Red Army. But on the other hand, I mean, the other two, the 2/3 of the Luftwaffe was in the west. Nearly 100% of the German Navy, nearly 100%, I would say 90%, was also in the west. So until, I mean, towards the very end, it sort of changed because German shipping was used for evacuations. But I don't accept that that would have it would have been that way. So Tuna says your convoys to Murmansk were a killer. I met somebody. I used to be a member of this Russian club, and we had a talk from somebody. It was a British liaison officer, and he was based in Murmansk and in Archangel, and he described what it was like at the time, because he was living there permanently. So that was his job, was to be a liaison with the Russians. Now I met I met him in 2005, and he was then. I mean, it was very very vivid, his recollections, what things looked like, and he explained how the contact with the locals was almost impossible. People were terrified even to speak to them, things like that. And anyway, so Colin White says Uncle John was on board PQ-17. The returning convoy is QP. Sorry, that's correct. Yes, and great. I mean, PQ-17. The losses were horrendous. And anyway, and so I obviously would have been on. Colin's uncle would have been on QP-17 because presumably he was still alive. Okay, he might have been killed. So yeah, I suppose he could have been on just one. He was. He went to Coca-Cola in Sled. All right. So and Tuna knew an old sailor who served on the Murmansk route too, and Christopher writes that Vucic is a Putin puppet. Right. So anyway, good. I've done just about what I want to do there, and I'll tell you what I was going to do tomorrow. Was I did a video on Dynamit, which was Dynamit Axon Gesellschaft, DAG Bromberg, now it's a museum there called the Exploseum in Bydgoszcz in Poland. That was the second biggest Nazi ammunition plant. It supplied something like 30% of all the ammunition used on the Eastern Front, or at least it was by 1944. The biggest is a place called Christianstadt, and I was going to go there tomorrow. At least that was the plan. And now I thought I might be going to Ukraine tomorrow. I mean, I'm just, but anyway, so I got this chance of going there. So I thought, oh, that's great. I'll go there and do some. I'll do some filming, and that's been put off. So I'll be going there on. Well, sorry, I don't know. Don't know where I'm going to be. If I'm still here on Monday, I'll go there on Monday. But that's something I really wanted to do, and this just came up. Somebody said to me, "Look, are you going to Zielona Góra? And do you want to go?" And I said, "Well, not really. You know why?" And then he said, he told me the place he was going to. And he didn't know where. He asked me where it was. I said, "Yeah, I definitely want to go there." And so that's how that's turning up. So yeah. Anyway, Apki mentions this cocaine story about Mr. Zelensky being a cocaine addict. Well, I wouldn't know what a cocaine addict looks like, but it doesn't seem that he wouldn't make much of a successful commander. He certainly doesn't. He certainly looks pretty clear and he's pretty lucid in the way he speaks, despite the pressure he must be under. I mean, he does sometimes look as though he hasn't slept, which is not surprising in his condition. So so Colin points out that Jelenia Góra means green mountain, or maybe means green hill, or in German it's Grünberg as well. So it didn't kept the same sort of name. Sorry, not my saying here, green mountain. It's Hirschberg is Jelenia Góra, and Zielona Góra is, sorry, there's a bit. Oh, you see, if I'd done this in a video, I'd have taken that bit out. Colin wrote, Jelenia Góra means green mountain. Yelen is a deer, so it means the deer's mountain. The green mountain is Zielona. Zielona is green. Zielona Góra. Anyway, deer mountain. Yes, Hirschberg. So it's the same. So it's this Grünberg and Hirschberg in German. Anyway, so that was my plan, was to go to this factory, and the thing is this huge factory complex. I mean, I looked at it in the Google Maps and around when I was doing my stuff on Dynamit Aktiengesellschaft in Bydgoszcz. I mean, I was comparing it and looking at, and there's very little archival stuff on this. So I thought that's quite interesting actually. So I thought I'd go there and film it now. I'll try and put together a video, and then then I'll see if I can find out some more. I'll tell you what else I've done this week. I've done so I'm putting a video together. Finished writing it on General Johannes Blaskowitz. So I finished that. It's about a video about 35 minutes long. Currently about 35 minutes long. I might be a bit short on that by the time I finish. And I started another video on writing about personal growth code. And he is not very well known in the German resistance. So that one, I do want to do more on the German resistance. Now, Colin asks me if I'll be doing it in the Bromberg massacre. What do you mean? The massacre of the German population, which took place in the first third, or the massacre which took place afterwards of the local Poles? I've been rather curious about the with the German. I mean, I'm convinced it did happen. I'm not. I don't think it was some Nazi propaganda that went wrong. I don't think also it was a false flag or anything. I mean, it could well have been. But I will do something. Yeah. I will. I actually I spent 2 weeks in Bydgoszcz last year in June, and I filmed quite a lot when I was there. And the thing was, I would have even stayed longer, but it was I had these other things I wanted to do as well, and so I just sort of I felt as though I had to sort of move on. Dennis asks a really good question. Sorry, so the answer to the question about Bydgoszcz is yes. I'm going to be doing more on Bydgoszcz because I've got lots of notes and things like that, which I'll put together. And I'm also interested in doing these so-called self-defense thing. units, these Selbstschutz, the alleged German self-defense organizations, which I want to write. So I also wrote something about the Jewish history of Bydgoszcz as well, and so there's Jewish citizens, most of whom left by 1920, when it was transferred from Germany to Poland. How long will it be before Putin organizes acts of terrorism against Western countries? And then denying it, of course. Well, we've seen acts of terrorism. We saw a plane that was shot down, the Malaysian Airlines plane. That was an act of terrorism, which was a Russian missile which shot them down, and with any shadow of doubt. And will you do other things? I don't know, because it's very difficult. What you do is do via proxies. So the same way, for example, you'd have organizations like the IRA, which got their weapons largely from places like Libya, but they would have been sent from the Soviet Union. And so it would take place any act of terrorism would take place via proxy. So we do this through our presumably ISIS, I presume, I think, but that's a very dangerous route to go down, because radical Muslim terrorism is more likely to come from to happen in Russia. I don't know. Maybe it will be that. Have I been to Radom? Yes, I have. And Colin points out there was a sniffing ghetto. And on my other channel, I have a video on the ghetto in Radom. I found something. I was in an archive, about 2006, 2007. And there was a story of one person who got out the ghetto, and then he was captured and he was shot. And his name is Yankiel Piskosz. And so I thought, that is such a story. I did a video on it. I mean, because I had the original paper, I thought, I can give somebody's name back. And IRA got Czech Semtex via Libya, for example. So this is so. I mean, things like this could happen. But the terrorism that we've seen, though, has been largely aimed at creating refugee situations. And then what's happened is they use the right or the anti-immigrant feeling in the countries where the refugees go to. So the fact that they can cause a massive wave of people trying to escape from places like Syria by the terrorist activities which takes place in Syria, and this causes a massive outflow of people, and that is how Putin does terrorism. I mean, at the moment, from Ukraine, of a population of approximately 45 million, something like that, there are 11.5 million displaced people. More than one person in four is currently displaced. And half of those who are displaced here in the European Union. So this is how he's seeking. I mean, he did the same thing in Chechnya, for example, and I think to a large degree there was an attempt to do the same thing in Georgia by indiscriminate bombing. Or it could be argued that the indiscriminate bombing was deliberately to destroy the infrastructure of the country. It wasn't for anything else. Okay, right. Well, thanks for everybody for being here today. I shall finish it here. And actually, I did that much quicker than I thought I might do. I thought if I try and do the entire speech, I'll be here. I'll be here all night. But in fact, I did do the entire speech. You've got my breakdown of it. I did it a little bit longer than he did it in. But then again, I was trying to break down what I didn't mention, of course, what wasn't said. And there was no declaration of war. There was no mass mobilization. There was just what he said was sort of rather, I wouldn't say weak, but I think it was, if anything, it was a bit on the conciliatory side. There you go. I've said it was conciliatory. Nobody else said it was conciliatory. It was conciliatory by not being aggressive, if you like. So anyway, just never. Yeah, so Colin suggesting there'll be a corrupt plebiscite when there's nobody there. Yeah. It'll be a genuine plebiscite in that case. Scared everybody off, and then you hold a plebiscite. Yeah. Okay. Thanks to everybody. Oh, hello, Annie. You're late. Thanks to everybody for being here this evening, and I was going to do one of this when I was out. I was out on my bicycle. And I thought I'll do a. But then again, it'd have been much earlier. Okay, Annie fell asleep. Oh, I'm sorry, it wasn't interesting enough. Okay. I've got, if you're interested in motorhomes, I've got a motorhome video in 29 minutes. But if you're not, then never mind. Thanks for watching. Thanks for everybody being here. And from me, bye for now.